Welcome to this video as always. Now I just learned something yesterday, and that President Trump apparently, it's been reported, is taking this zinc, a zinc supplement. And I thought that's interesting. Let's do a bit of background on that. Now I am convinced, if you've watched this channel you'll know this, that this stuff is going to be helpful as an immunoprotective and an immunomodulator, in that people that are short of vitamin D can be immunocompromised. But what about zinc? It's an interesting question. Now, the thing about vitamin D and zinc, I just happen to have got these from a particular supplier. You get them from the supermarket. They're just general, very cheap supplements. And when I say very cheap, the pharmaceutical manufacturers, I guess they could make 1,000 doses of each of these for about $1. You know, basically they're free. So given that these medicines are generic, well, they're not medicines, they're supplements, given that they're free, then no one can make any significant money out of it, because any reputable manufacturer can produce these literally by the ton. So there's not a lot of vested interest in promoting these in terms of financial gain. Lots of money to be made from expensive vaccines, lots of money to be made from expensive drugs, from clever clogs treatments. But, you know, what about the basic things? Anyway, that's enough of me prattling on. Let's get straight down to the evidence. So I thought, okay, President Trump's taking that. There's probably some evidence for it. Let's look at what it is. And there is. I mean, I have been aware of zinc for a long time, of course. I mean, zinc is in quite a few over-the-counter cold remedies. And there is evidence that people that are low on zinc are much more likely to get common colds. But let's stick to the pandemic in hand at the moment. So first study, and I'm going to look at two studies today. First study. Now the bottom line of this video, by the way, does seem to be very protective. That's the bottom line. But first study. Low zinc levels at clinical admission associated with poor outcomes in COVID-19. So this is from research from Barcelona, from what we might call the first wave in Spain. Now, these are direct quotes from this paper. Zinc balances immune responses and also has a proven direct antiviral action against some viruses. Right, now let's just notice the words there. Proven, direct, antiviral action against some viruses. So this is a known antiviral mineral. This is already known. This is not something new and speculative. And given that, you've really got to wonder why there's been no randomized clinical trials organised on this. It really is surprising. But let's go on. Zinc deficiency is a common condition in elderly and individuals with chronic disease. So this is not unique, and we'll see in Spain, the zinc levels in Spain do seem to be quite low. Increased intracellular zinc concentrations efficiently impair replication of the virus. Now here it's talking about the SARS coronavirus 2 virus, the COVID-19 virus. So that they are saying here that increased intracellular, that's inside the cells, zinc concentration impairs viral replication, which of course is exactly what we want. We don't want this virus reproducing all over the place, resulting in a lower number of viruses. So just by way of background, these are things that are really already known. The case is starting to get interesting, isn't it? Now their study was retrospective, which of course is not as good as a prospective study, but it's what we've got. Patients submitted in Barcelona in the first wave, 15th of March to the 30th of April, so about a 6-week course of admissions. And they assessed the clinical severity of COVID-19 and the past medical history of all these patients, so they knew who they were dealing with. Now, fasting plasma zinc levels measured routinely at admission. So every patient who came in routinely had their fasting zinc levels recorded. So this information was available, it was recorded. And it was recorded on 611 patients, the mean age of whom was 63 years, 55% of whom were male, therefore 45% were female. Total mortality was 87 patients, that's 14% during the time of the study. But there's a problem. Once they started getting busy again, they didn't have time to analyse all this data. So they've only analysed data from 249 of the 611 patients, but they do feel this is a representative sample. Now, you can understand that the doctors are busy and have to go back to treating sick people, but why on earth a PhD student from Spain doesn't pick this up and run with this is just baffling. Let's hope they make this available, because it would be much better to get the data from 611 than 249. Some non-clinical researcher could easily process this information in perhaps just a few weeks. Let's hope that's done and we get an updated paper. But of the 249, 21, that's 8%, died. Now, baseline zinc levels on admission. 21 people died in this group, with a mean plasma zinc at 43 micrograms a deciliter. So people who had an average zinc level on admission of 43 micrograms a deciliter, 21 of those people died. Now, amongst the survivors, the people that survived, their mean zinc level was 63.1 micrograms a litre. So that was the average zinc level in the people that died. That was the average zinc level in the people that survived. So here we can see we have a pretty strong correlation. This is a correlation. Can we say that it was the low zinc levels that made people more likely to die? Can we say it was the better zinc levels that made people more likely to survive? Absolutely, we can't say that. This is a correlation, but it's a very interesting one. And it's one which really needs studied, because zinc could be rolled out to the world's population for essentially no cost, the same as vitamin D to the world's population that currently needs immunoprotection. High zinc levels associated with lower maximum levels of interleukin-6 during active infection. So people that had higher levels of zinc, they had lower levels of interleukin-6. Now, what is this? Well, interleukin-6 is one of these cytokines that we've heard about, one of the things that contributes to the cytokine storm. And basically, the higher the interleukin-6, the higher the inflammation. So what this is saying is higher levels of zinc, lower levels of inflammation, which of course is exactly what we want. So good levels of zinc associated with lower levels of inflammation, and it's the inflammation, of course, which causes the acute respiratory distress syndrome and many other problems. Zinc levels lower than 50 micrograms per deciliter. That figure there is a mu, so that's 50. It's micrograms like that with a long tail. It's the Greek letter mu, but it means micro. So this is micrograms we're talking about. A deciliter, of course, is 100 mils of blood. Zinc levels lower than 50 micrograms a deciliter of admission, with 2.3 times an increased risk of in-hospital deaths. I mean, wow. You know, given that we've got results like this, and we're in the middle of a pandemic, why aren't people around the world picking up on this, running with it and planning clinical trials on it? Because this drug is essentially, these medicines, not medicines, supplements, they're basically free. So what this said here was zinc levels lower than 50, where have I gone? Yep. Zinc levels lower than 50 micrograms a deciliter of admission, 2.3 times increased risk of in-hospital death compared to those with 50 micrograms per deciliter. So the people with lower levels of zinc, below 50, 2.3 times more likely to die. 2.3 times more likely to die than people with 50 micrograms a deciliter or higher. Now, very often the difference is not as easy to see as this. Very often what people do is they'll take, so here they've like divided it in half, below 50 and above 50. Below 50, more likely to die. Above 50, less likely to die zinc. Very often what people do is they'll take all of the ranges of zinc and divide it into quarters, or anything, whatever they're studying, and say, well, the lowest quarter is more likely to die than the highest quarter. But here it's a straight cut off in the middle, indicating perhaps a more powerful effect. Interesting. Lower zinc levels at admission correlates with higher inflammation in the course of the infection and poorer outcomes. Direct quote, it's in italics. Direct quote from the paper. Low plasma zinc levels at admission are associated with mortality in COVID-19 in our study. They're more likely to die with lower zinc levels. Further studies are needed to assess the therapeutic action of this association. So what they've done is they've demonstrated this association. It's a correlation study. Does this mean taking a zinc supplement is going to be prophylactic? Prevent someone from getting more severe inflammatory related COVID-19 disease? Is it going to mean they have a viral load? Is it going to be a good prophylactic? We don't know. The studies haven't been done. If people are admitted with COVID-19 and we give zinc at that stage, is that going to act as a treatment, reducing complications and reducing death? Don't know. No one's bothered doing the study. But if I had to guess, it's looking promising, isn't it? Now, one more paper. This is from Chennai in India, the city that used to be called Madras. COVID-19, poor outcomes in patients with zinc deficiency, International Journal of Infectious Diseases. By the way, this is accepted, peer-reviewed. The first one has not yet been peer-reviewed, but I've read it and it looks pretty good to me. I'm pretty convinced, actually. Otherwise, I wouldn't be wasting my time with this video. Now, this isn't even due to be published yet, so it's in the November issue. It was actually published a few weeks ago as an electronic print. A prospective study of fasting zinc levels in COVID-19 patients at the time of hospitalisation, so very similar. Now, they found healthy controls had a mean level of 105.8 micrograms of zinc per decilitre of blood. Now, this is a lot higher than the Spanish levels. So were the Spanish levels already low? Interesting. So I wanted to check that. So whenever I want to check a medical fact, I get out my much used and trusted Davidson's Principles and Practice of Medicine. And I hope we can see this. So here we see the normal levels of zinc are 72 to 144 micrograms per decilitre. Now it's a bit confusing because this is the old-fashioned way of measuring it, which both studies use. This is the modern way, the SI unit. But given that both studies were using this, we can see that the Spanish levels were already actually quite low, because they're the normal reference levels according to Davidson. So if anything, this reinforces the results of the Spanish study, because their zinc levels were already relatively low. Anyway, that's the data we got from India. That they found the controls had 105 micrograms per decilitre. Anyway, I don't want to get too involved in the figures because it's high or low we're interested in, really. Now, the study in India, the researchers say zinc is a trace element with potential immunoregulatory and antiviral properties. So the Indian doctors are completely agreeing with the Spanish doctors, but making it clear it's immunoregulatory. Now, immunoregulatory, immunomodulating, well, we know vitamin D does this. We're now learning that zinc does this as well. So it stops excess inflammation and presumably facilitates adequate inflammation, which is necessary as part of the immune process. So zinc important as that sort of immunoregulator. Is utilised in the treatment of coronavirus disease 2019, apparently, according to the Indian studies, in India. I don't know that it's being used in other countries, but in India they seem to be using it therapeutically, according to what they're saying there. Now, we don't have evidence for that yet because the trials haven't been done, but just reporting what the Indian doctors are saying. Patients with serious COVID-19 had significantly lower zinc levels compared to healthy controls. So again, they're saying more serious disease, lower levels of zinc. Zinc deficiency COVID patients developed more complications. So the difference here is that zinc deficient patients, in the patients that are deficient in zinc, 70.4% develop complications. In the patients that are not deficient of zinc, 30% developed complications. So big difference. Zinc deficient patients, 70% developing complications. Non-zinc deficient patients developing only 30% developed complications. And the p-value there is p equals 0.009, which means it's a very significant result. The probability of that arising by chance is remarkably low. Acute respiratory distress syndrome, more common in people with low zinc. More steroids required in people with low zinc. And that makes sense because if you haven't got the zinc acting as an immunomodulator, the steroids can bring the inflammation levels down and increase mortality. Patients with lower levels of zinc more likely to die. Zinc deficient COVID-19 patients had a prolonged stay in hospital. Zinc deficient patients, it was 7.9 days. Non-zinc deficient patients, 5.7 days. Again, a significant result. And the Indian researchers point out that in vitro studies, in experiments, reduced zinc levels increase SARS coronavirus 2 virus receptor interactions. So reduced zinc levels increase increase the interactions between the virus and the receptor. Now we know about this, so if this is the spike of the virus and that's the receptor, then the virus clicks into there to put the virus RNA into the cell that it infects. So if there's reduced levels of zinc, that happens more easily. High levels of zinc, that happens less easily. So again, good levels of zinc, from this it would appear, are preventing the spread of the virus from one cell to another. Increased zinc levels inhibit ACE2 expression. ACE2 are the receptors the virus binds into. So again, that will potentially reduce the ability of the virus to reproduce. So, interesting. Two pretty good correlation studies. But I just wanted to do a quick review before we finish this video of what we already know. So I went to the National Institutes of Health website. Look it up for yourself. What zinc does? Well, it's catalytic activity of approximately 100 enzymes. In other words, it's necessary for the biochemistry of the cell. Plays a role in immune function, in producing proteins, in wound healing, in producing DNA for cell division, and indeed in cell division itself. It's needed for normal growth and development, pregnancy, childhood and adolescence. And interestingly, it's also required for normal taste and smell. Well, that one was interesting. Now, zinc and immunity specifically. Zinc deficiency depresses immune function. Simply stated as fact, this is a direct quote. Even mild to moderate degrees of zinc deficiency can impair macrophage and neutrophil function. Macrophage are some of the white cells, the neutrophils are others of the white cells needed for the immune response. And also, particularly, zinc is necessary for the function of the natural killer cells, which are very antiviral cells. And also complement is another component of the immune system. Body requires zinc to develop and activate T lymphocytes. Now, we've talked a lot about T lymphocytes. These are completely essential in the response to SARS coronavirus 2. And the body requires zinc to develop and activate T lymphocytes. This is all already known. Low zinc levels have been shown to reduce lymphocyte proliferation. So the lymphocytes, again, these antiviral cells, and the proliferation means the way that they divide and increase in number if there's an infection. And it also says this problem can be corrected with zinc supplementation. So here we see the National Institutes of Health saying that these problems can be corrected with zinc supplementation if the zinc levels are low, and other studies have said that low zinc levels are common. Do you see what I'm saying here? This is actually quite profound stuff, isn't it? It's actually quite amazing, this, really. Low zinc status has been associated with increased susceptibility to pneumonia and other infections in children in developing countries and the elderly. So there's some definite science in these groups anyway. So where does zinc come from? Well, not many of us eat oysters. I've never tried one in my life. Other seafood, probably hard to get. But it's in beef, pork, baked beans, fortified cereals, pumpkin seeds, yogurt, cashew nuts, chickpeas, oats and almonds. It's in all of those things. And the supplement is essentially free to produce. So President Trump's taking extra zinc. The science shows that low levels of zinc are correlated with more severe SARS coronavirus 2 infection and correlated with more deaths. What we don't know is if giving zinc will prevent people getting sick, and what we don't know if giving zinc will help people recover when they are sick. We can't say that because these are correlation studies. So more clinical trials desperately needed, but it would appear that the president and those advising him are sufficiently convinced of the efficacy of zinc to give the president additional zinc, presumably in the form of a supplement. And if you're listening, Mr. President, I would love to know what dose you're taking. So with that, thank you for watching this video as always.